What would you do if you discovered that the person you loved most in your life abandoned you at the moment you needed them the most? This is my story, and I promise you by the end of it you'll understand why some wounds never heal, but also why love can come from the most unexpected places. My name is Margaret Thompson and I'm 67 years old. I live in a small house in Portland, Oregon, the same house where I raised my son David all by myself after his father passed away when David was only 8. For almost 20 years I worked 2 jobs to give that boy everything he needed. During the day I was a nurse at the community hospital, and at night I cleaned office buildings downtown. I barely slept 4 hours a night, but I didn't care. David was my whole world, my reason for living, my greatest pride. You know how mothers are, right? We sacrifice everything for our children without even thinking about it. While other women my age were going out, dating, or taking care of themselves, I was working my fingers to the bone to pay for David's college, his books, his car, his apartment. I wanted him to have all the opportunities one never had. I wanted him to be successful, to never struggle like I did. And David did become successful. He graduated with honors in business, got a great job at a marketing company, married a lovely girl named Jessica, and bought a beautiful house in the suburbs. I was so proud of him. Every time someone asked me about my son, my chest would swell with pride. "My David is doing so well," I'd say. "He's got everything he ever wanted." But success changes people, doesn't it? As David climbed the corporate ladder, as his salary grew, as his life became more comfortable, something else grew too: the distance between us. The phone calls became shorter. The visits became rarer. The excuses became more frequent. "Mom, I'm sorry I can't come this weekend. Jessica and I have this dinner with my boss. Mom, I can't talk long. I'm in the middle of an important presentation. Mom, maybe next month. Things are really busy at work right now." I told myself it was normal. Successful people are busy people, right? I convinced myself that David still loved me just as much, he just had more responsibilities now. He had a wife to take care of, a career to build, a future to secure. I understood. At least I tried to understand. If you're watching this and you're a parent, please hit that like button because you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. The hardest part of being a parent isn't the sleepless nights when they're babies, or the worry when they're teenagers. The hardest part is watching them grow away from you and pretending it doesn't break your heart a little more each day. The last few months had been particularly difficult for me. I'd been feeling tired all the time, getting short of breath just walking up the stairs, and sometimes I'd feel this strange pressure in my chest like someone was sitting on it. But I didn't want to worry David. He had enough on his plate. Besides, I'd been taking care of sick people my whole career. I figured I'd know if something was really wrong. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I was doing some light housework, dusting the family photos on the mantelpiece. Most of them were of David at different stages of his life: his graduation, his wedding, his promotion celebration. I paused at my favorite photo, the one where he's about 12 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, hugging me tight after I surprised him with tickets to a baseball game. Back then I was his hero. Back then I was enough. The doorbell rang around 2 in the afternoon. When I opened it, I couldn't believe my eyes. David was standing there with a small bouquet of flowers and that charming smile that used to melt my heart when he was in trouble as a child. "Hi, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." I was so surprised and happy I almost started crying right there on the doorstep. It had been over 2 months since his last visit. "David, what a wonderful surprise. Come in, come in. Are you hungry? I can make you something to eat." "No, no, Mom, I can't stay long," he said, looking at his expensive watch. "Jessica's expecting me back soon. We're meeting some clients for dinner tonight." Even though he said he couldn't stay long, I was thrilled. My son was there, in my living room, actually talking to me face to face instead of through those rushed phone calls. We sat on the old couch, the same one where I used to read him bedtime stories, and he told me about work, about a big promotion he might get, about Jessica's new job. I listened to every word like it was the most important news in the world. This was my son, my baby, sharing his life with me. For those 20 minutes I felt like the luckiest mother alive. But then, right in the middle of him telling me about some business trip he was planning, it happened. The pressure in my chest suddenly became a crushing pain, like a giant fist squeezing my heart. The room started spinning and I felt like I couldn't breathe. "David," I managed to whisper, clutching my chest. "Something's wrong. I can't breathe." I saw his face change from casual conversation to alarm. Mom, what's happening?" The pain was getting worse. It felt like someone had lit a fire inside my chest and it was spreading through my whole body. I tried to stand up but my legs wouldn't hold me. The last thing I remember clearly is David's voice, sounding far away, saying something about calling for help. Then everything went black. When I started to come back to consciousness, I was moving. There were voices around me, professional voices talking in medical terms I recognized from my nursing days. Elderly female, possible cardiac event, blood pressure dropping, need to get her to the hospital immediately. I tried to open my eyes, tried to speak, but everything felt so heavy. Through the fog in my mind, I had one clear thought. Where was David? Was he with me? Was he holding my hand like I had held his so many times when he was sick as a child? I managed to crack my eyes open just a little. I was in an ambulance, that much I could tell. There was a paramedic working over me, checking my vital signs, adjusting an oxygen mask over my face. But I couldn't see David anywhere. My son, I tried to say through the mask, but it came out as just a mumble. The paramedic leaned closer. What did you say, ma'am? My son, I repeated clearer this time. Is my son coming with me? The paramedic and his partner exchanged a look. Ma'am, there was a young man at the house when we arrived. He said he was your son. He gave us your information and told us about your medical history. My heart lifted a little despite the pain. David had helped them. He had given them the information they needed. Of course he did. He was probably following in his car, probably calling Jessica to tell her what happened, probably worried sick about me. He said he would meet us at the hospital, the paramedic continued. I closed my eyes and tried to relax. David would meet us at the hospital. Everything would be okay. My son would be there when I needed him most. But then I heard the paramedics talking quietly to each other, thinking I couldn't hear them over the sound of the siren. Did you see that guy? One of them said. His mom's having a heart attack and he seemed more annoyed than worried. Yeah, and did you hear what he said when we were loading her up? He actually asked if this was going to take long because he had dinner plans. Some people, man. I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I still can't understand how someone can be so cold to their own mother. I felt like I'd been slapped. There had to be some mistake. They must have misunderstood David. He was probably just in shock, that's all. People react differently to emergencies. David loved me. He was probably just scared and didn't know how to show it properly. The rest of the ambulance ride was a blur of medical procedures and growing pain in my chest. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the seed of doubt that had been planted in my mind by those paramedics' words. When we arrived at the hospital, I was rushed into the emergency room. Nurses and doctors swarmed around me, asking questions, running tests, hooking me up to machines. Through it all, I kept looking toward the door, waiting for David to come bursting in, worried and apologetic for not riding in the ambulance with me. But he never came. Hours passed. I was moved to a room in the cardiac unit. The doctors explained that I'd had a heart attack, not a massive one, but serious enough to require careful monitoring and treatment. They talked about blocked arteries, about medication, about lifestyle changes. I nodded and tried to focus on what they were saying, but part of my mind was always on that door, waiting for it to open, waiting for my son to walk through it. A kind nurse named Patricia came to check on me around 10 o'clock that night. She was about my age, with gentle hands and a warm smile that reminded me of the nurses I used to work with. "How are you feeling, honey?" she asked while checking my IV. "Better," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. The physical pain was manageable with medication, but there was another kind of pain growing in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart. "Has anyone come to see me? My son said he would meet me here." Patricia's smile faltered just a little. "I'm sorry, dear. I haven't seen anyone asking for you. But visiting hours are over now anyway. I'm sure your family will be here first thing in the morning." I nodded and tried to smile back, but inside I was falling apart. David said he would meet me at the hospital. Where was he? Had something happened to him too? Had he been in an accident rushing to get here? My mind raced through all the possible explanations, each one more desperate than the last. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in that hospital bed, listening to the beeping of machines and the distant sounds of the hospital, feeling more alone than I had ever felt before. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway, my heart would jump, thinking it might be David. But the footsteps always passed by my room. As the hours crawled by, I started to remember things more clearly. The way David had looked at his watch constantly during his visit. The way he had seemed almost impatient when I was having the heart attack, like it was an inconvenience rather than a medical emergency. The way the paramedics had talked about him. But no, I told myself. I was being unfair. I was scared and alone and not thinking clearly. David was probably at home worried sick, calling the hospital every hour to check on me. Maybe they weren't giving him information because of privacy laws. Maybe he tried to visit but got confused about which hospital I was at. I clung to these explanations like a drowning person clings to a life preserver. Because the alternative, that my son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, had simply walked away when I needed him most, was too horrible to accept. The next morning, Dr. Peterson came to see me. He was a cardiologist, probably in his 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He pulled up a chair next to my bed and spoke to me like I was a person, not just a patient. Mrs. Thompson, I want to explain to you what happened yesterday and what we need to do going forward. He showed me the results of my tests, explained that I had significant blockage in 2 of my arteries, talked about medication and possible procedures. I tried to focus on what he was saying. It was important, I knew that, but I kept glancing at the door. Doctor, I finally interrupted. Has anyone called asking about me? My son, David Thompson. Dr. Peterson consulted his chart. I don't see any record of calls from family members, but let me check with the nurses' station. He stepped out for a moment and came back shaking his head. No, Mrs. Thompson. No one has called or come by asking about you. The room seemed to tilt around me. But that can't be right. My son was there when it happened. He was supposed to meet me here. Dr. Peterson's expression grew more concerned, but not about my heart. Mrs. Thompson, is there someone else we can call for you? Another family member or a close friend? The question hit me like a physical blow. Someone else to call? I had spent so much of my life focused on David, on being the best mother I could be, that I had let most of my friendships fade away. My sister lived across the country and we barely talked anymore. My few remaining friends from work were dealing with their own families, their own problems. No, I whispered. There's just David. That afternoon I finally worked up the courage to call David myself. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number, and not from the medication. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, and when he did he sounded distracted. Hello. David? It's Mom. Oh, hi Mom. How are you doing? How was I doing? I was in the hospital after a heart attack, alone and scared, and my son was asking how I was doing like I had called to chat about the weather. David, I'm still in the hospital. The doctors say I had a heart attack. Where are you? You said you would meet me here. There was a pause and I could hear voices in the background, the sound of laughter like he was at a party or a restaurant. Oh Mom, I'm really sorry about that. Things got crazy after the ambulance came. Jessica was upset and then we had that dinner with the clients and it's been one thing after another. How are you feeling now? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dinner with clients? While I was lying in a hospital bed, having survived a heart attack, my son was having dinner with clients. David, I almost died yesterday. I'm alone here. I need you. Mom, don't be so dramatic. The doctors are taking good care of you, right? And you're feeling better now. Look, I'll try to stop by sometime this week, okay? But things are really busy at work right now. We're trying to land this huge account and I can't really take time off. Dramatic. He called me dramatic for saying I almost died. Which I had. The doctors had told me that if the ambulance had arrived even 10 minutes later, I might not have survived. David, please. I'm scared. I just need to see you just for a few minutes. Mom, you're going to be fine. You're tough, remember? You always told me that. Listen, I have to go now, but I'll call you later, okay? The line went dead before I could say another word. I sat there holding the phone, staring at it like it was a foreign object. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be the same David who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to beg me to read him just one more story before bedtime, who used to make me Mother's Day cards with crayon drawings of the 2 of us holding hands. For those of you watching who have adult children, I want you to take a moment and subscribe to this channel because what I'm about to tell you next will shock you to your core just like it shocked me. Sometimes the people we love most, the people we sacrifice everything for, show us who they really are in the moments when we need them most. The second day in the hospital was worse than the first, because now I knew for certain that David wasn't coming. The hope that had kept me going through that first terrible night was gone, replaced by a pain that was deeper and more persistent than anything in my chest. I watched other patients receive visitors. The woman in the room next to mine had a steady stream of family members, children, grandchildren, sisters, friends. The man across the hall was never alone for more than an hour. Someone was always there to hold his hand, to bring him magazines, to just sit with him. And here I was, the woman who had worked 2 jobs for 20 years to give her son everything he wanted, completely alone. Patricia, the kind nurse, seemed to notice. She spent a little extra time in my room, asked me more questions than necessary, brought me extra blankets without being asked. I think she could see how isolated I was, how desperate I was for any human connection. On the 3rd day I called David again. This time I got his voicemail. "Hi, you've reached David Thompson. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." "David, it's Mom again. I'm still in the hospital. The doctors say I might need surgery. Please call me back. Please come see me. I really need you right now." He never called back. That night, as I lay in that hospital bed for the 3rd night in a row, I finally allowed myself to think the unthinkable. My son didn't care about me anymore. Somewhere along the way, as he had built his successful life, I had become irrelevant to him. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was just an obligation, an inconvenience, a reminder of a past he wanted to leave behind. The thought was so painful that I actually clutched my chest, wondering if I was having another heart attack. But no, this was a different kind of pain. This was the pain of a mother's heart breaking, not from blocked arteries, but from the realization that the child she loved more than life itself had grown into a stranger who couldn't even spare an hour to sit with her when she was scared and alone. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time David had told me he loved me. I couldn't. I tried to remember the last time he had hugged me like he meant it, not just a quick, obligatory embrace. I couldn't remember that either. How had I missed it? How had I not seen that I was losing my son, not to death or distance but to indifference? How had the boy who used to depend on me for everything become a man who couldn't even be bothered to check if I was still alive? As I drifted off to sleep that night, I whispered into the darkness, "David, if you could see me now, would you even care?" But I was afraid I already knew the answer. The 4th morning in the hospital brought a small spark of hope. I woke up to find Dr. Peterson standing by my bed with what looked like good news written on his face. "Mrs. Thompson, I have some encouraging updates about your condition," he said, pulling up the familiar chair beside my bed. "Your heart is responding well to the medication, and while we're still monitoring you closely, it looks like we might be able to avoid the more invasive procedures we discussed." I should have been relieved. I should have been grateful. And I was truly. But all I could think about was how much I wanted to share this good news with David. I wanted to call him and hear the relief in his voice. I wanted him to rush over and hug me and tell me how scared he'd been. "That's wonderful news, doctor," I managed to say. "When do you think I might be able to go home?" "Well, let's take it one day at a time. But if you continue to improve like this, maybe by the end of the week. Do you have someone who can stay with you for the first few days? After a cardiac event like this, we don't like patients to be alone." There it was again, that question about having someone. I nodded automatically, not wanting to explain that the someone I was counting on hadn't even bothered to visit me once. After Peterson left, I stared at the phone beside my bed for a long time before finally picking it up and dialing David's number again. This time he actually answered on the 2nd ring. "Hi Mom, how are you feeling today?" His voice sounded normal, cheerful, even like we were just having one of our regular weekly check-ins. Like I wasn't lying in a hospital bed after nearly dying. "David, I have good news," I said, trying to match his tone. "The doctor says I'm improving. I might be able to go home by the end of the week." "That's great, Mom. I told you you'd be fine. You're tough as nails." There was something in his voice, a kind of dismissive cheerfulness that made my stomach clench. It was the same tone you'd use to congratulate someone on getting over a common cold. "David, when I do come home, the doctor says I shouldn't be alone for the first few days. Could you maybe stay with me? Or could I stay with you and Jessica for just a couple of nights?" The silence on the other end of the phone stretched on so long that I thought the call had been dropped. "David? Are you there?" "Yeah, I'm here. Mom, look, that's really not going to work out. Jessica's been feeling under the weather lately and we can't risk her catching anything. Plus, my schedule is absolutely insane right now. Can't you hire a nurse or something? You know, someone professional." Hire a nurse. My own son was suggesting I hire a stranger to take care of me instead of letting his own mother stay in his house for 2 nights. David, I don't need a nurse. I just need someone nearby in case something happens. I'm scared to be alone right now. Mom, you're being overly anxious. Nothing's going to happen. And besides, aren't you a nurse yourself? You probably know more about taking care of yourself than anyone else would. I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes. David, being a nurse doesn't mean I can take care of myself if I have another heart attack. And I'm retired, remember? I'm not as sharp as I used to be. Look, Mom, I really have to go. I'm late for a meeting already. But I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do. Talk to you later, okay? The line went dead, leaving me holding the phone and trying to process what had just happened. My son had just brushed off my fear, my need for help, my request for basic human comfort like I was asking him for a favor that was too much trouble. I put the phone down and lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. The good news about my recovery suddenly didn't seem so good anymore. What was the point of getting better if I was just going home to an empty house, with no one who cared whether I lived or died? That afternoon I was moved to a different room, a private room which should have been nice, but somehow just made me feel more isolated. My new neighbor across the hall was an elderly man named Frank who'd had hip replacement surgery. Throughout the day I watched a parade of people visit him. His wife, his 3 adult children, his grandchildren, even what looked like old friends from work. Around dinner time his youngest daughter was helping him eat, cutting up his food and making jokes to keep his spirits up. I couldn't help but stare. This is what family looked like. This is what love looked like. This daughter probably had her own busy life, her own problems, but here she was, spending her evening making sure her father felt cared for. Frank noticed me watching and gave me a little wave. "How are you doing over there, neighbor?" he called out. "I'm doing well, thank you," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. His daughter looked over and smiled. "Are you here by yourself? Would you like some company? I could come sit with you for a while after Dad falls asleep." The kindness of this stranger, this young woman who owed me nothing, almost broke me completely. "That's very sweet of you, but I'm fine." "Thank you." But I wasn't fine. I was the opposite of fine. That night I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I cried myself to sleep. Not quiet, dignified tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere so deep inside me that I didn't even know that place existed. The next day was Saturday. I knew this because the hospital had a different energy on weekends, fewer doctors making rounds, more families visiting, a more relaxed atmosphere overall. I had been in the hospital for 5 days now, and David still hadn't come to see me once. Patricia came in around noon to check my vitals. She'd been working extra shifts, so I'd seen her every day, and by now she felt more like family than my actual family did. "How are we doing today, Margaret?" she asked, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. "I'm okay," I said automatically. She finished taking my blood pressure and sat down in the chair, something nurses only do when they have time to really talk. "Margaret, honey, I've been a nurse for 32 years and I can tell when someone is just saying they're okay versus actually being okay. Do you want to talk about what's really going on?" Something about her gentle tone, her genuine concern, made all my carefully constructed defenses crumble. "My son hasn't come to see me," I whispered. "Not once. I raised him by myself, worked 2 jobs to put him through college, gave him everything I had. And now, when I need him most, he can't even spare an hour to visit his mother in the hospital." Patricia's face softened with understanding and something that looked like anger, not at me but for me. "Oh honey, I'm so sorry. That must hurt more than anything the doctors are treating you for." He was right. The physical pain from the heart attack was manageable. The emotional pain of my son's rejection was not. "You know," Patricia continued, "I've been doing this job for 3 decades and I've seen all kinds of families. I've seen families who seem perfect on the surface but are cold as ice to each other. And I've seen families that aren't related by blood but love each other more than anything. Blood doesn't always make family, Margaret. Love does. Commitment does. Showing up when someone needs you does." Her words stayed with me long after she left the room. The weekend passed in a haze of loneliness and medical routines. I tried calling David twice more, but both calls went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave messages. What was the point? On Sunday evening, I was picking at my dinner when I heard familiar laughter from the hallway. My heart jumped. Could it be David? Had he finally come? The laughter got closer and I held my breath as footsteps approached my room. But it wasn't David who appeared in my doorway. It was a young couple I didn't recognize, looking confused. Oh, I'm sorry, the young woman said. We're looking for room 314. We must be lost. That's 2 doors down, I told them, trying to hide my disappointment. Thank you. Are you here by yourself? She asked, noticing that my room was empty of flowers, cards, or any signs that people cared about me. Yes, but I'm fine, I said quickly. She looked like she wanted to say something more, but her husband gently guided her away. I heard her whisper as they walked down the hall. That poor woman. No one should be alone in the hospital like that. No one should be alone in the hospital like that. Her words echoed in my mind. She was right, of course. But what she didn't understand was that sometimes being alone is a choice other people make for you. Monday morning brought Dr. Peterson with more good news. Margaret, I think we can discharge you tomorrow if you're feeling up to it. Your tests all look good and I think you'd recover better in familiar surroundings. That's wonderful, I said, though the thought of going home to my empty house filled me with dread. Now, remember what we discussed about having someone stay with you for the first few days. Have you arranged for that? I nodded, lying smoothly. I had become quite good at lying over the past week, pretending I was fine, pretending I had support, pretending my heart wasn't breaking in ways that had nothing to do with blocked arteries. That afternoon I called David one more time to tell him I was being discharged. That's great news, Mom, he said when I told him. See, I knew you'd be fine. David, I was thinking maybe you could come by the house tomorrow evening? Just to see how I'm doing? It would mean so much to me. Oh, I wish I could, Mom, but tomorrow is crazy. We're presenting that big proposal I told you about, and then Jessica and I have this charity gala thing we have to go to. It's for my company, so I can't really skip it. A charity gala. My son couldn't visit his mother who was recovering from a heart attack because he had to go to a party. Maybe later in the week then? I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. Yeah, definitely. I'll call you and we'll figure something out. But I was beginning to understand that, I'll call you, and we'll figure something out, were David's polite ways of saying no, without actually having to say the word. After I hung up, I sat in that hospital bed and had a moment of absolute clarity. This wasn't going to get better. David wasn't going to suddenly remember that he loved me. He wasn't going to realize how much he had hurt me and come rushing over with apologies and promises to do better. This was who he was now. This was who I was to him, an inconvenience, an obligation he could postpone indefinitely, a part of his past he had outgrown. For those of you watching this who have ever felt forgotten by someone you love, please like this video because you understand the pain I'm about to describe. The pain of realizing that you matter less to someone than they matter to you is a special kind of agony. It's the pain of loving someone who has stopped loving you back, but unlike a romantic relationship, you can't just move on. This is your child. This is the person you would die for, who can't even spare an hour to visit you in the hospital. That night, my last night in the hospital, I barely slept. I kept thinking about going home tomorrow to that empty house, where I would recover alone, where I would wonder if anyone would even notice if something happened to me. I thought about the emergency contact forms I'd filled out when I was admitted. David's name and number were at the top of every form. But what good had that done me? He was my emergency contact, but in my actual emergency he was nowhere to be found. The next morning, Tuesday, I was getting dressed to go home when something happened that I'll never forget. Patricia came into my room not in her usual scrubs, but in street clothes. Margaret, honey, I know this might sound strange, but I've been thinking about you all night. I know you said you have arrangements for getting home and getting settled, but I want you to have my phone number. If you need anything at all, if you feel scared, if you need someone to talk to, if you just need to know that someone cares, you call me, okay? She pressed a piece of paper into my hand with her personal phone number written on it. I started to cry right there in front of her. This woman, who had known me for less than a week, was showing me more concern and kindness than my own son had. Patricia, I don't know what to say. You barely know me. Honey, I know enough. I know you're a good person who deserves better than being forgotten. I know you're scared to go home alone. And I know that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born with. Those words, the family we choose is more important than the family we're born with, hit me like lightning. As it was true. Patricia had chosen to care about me. Frank across the hall had chosen to be friendly. The young couple who got lost looking for room 314 had chosen to show concern for a stranger. David, my own flesh and blood, had chosen not to care. The taxi ride home was the longest 20-minute drive of my life. As we pulled up to my small house, I looked at it with new eyes. It wasn't home anymore. It was just a building where a lonely old woman lived, a place where no one would visit, where no one would call to check up on me. I paid the driver and walked slowly up the front steps, still weak from my hospital stay. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the silence that greeted me. The house looked exactly the same as it had the day I'd left in the ambulance. The dusting cloth was still on the coffee table where I'd dropped it when the chest pain started. David's flowers, the ones he'd brought during that last visit, were wilted and brown in their vase. I walked through the rooms that had once been filled with David's laughter, his friends, his energy. Now they were just empty spaces that echoed with memories of better times. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator, knowing it would be mostly empty after a week away. There was some leftover takeout that had gone bad, a few condiments and not much else. I would need to go grocery shopping, but the thought of driving, of being in crowded places, of doing all the normal things that normal people do when they have someone who cares about them felt overwhelming. I sat down at my kitchen table and looked at the phone. Part of me wanted to call David to tell him I was home safe, to give him one more chance to show that he cared. But I knew what would happen. He would give me a distracted, "That's great, Mom," and then find an excuse to get off the phone. Instead, I called Patricia. She answered on the second ring. "Margaret? How are you doing, honey? Did you make it home okay?" Just hearing her voice, hearing genuine concern in it, made me feel less alone. "I'm home," I told her. "It's strange being here after everything that's happened." "I bet it is. Listen, I meant what I said about calling if you need anything. I'm off work today, so if you need someone to go to the store with you, or if you just want some company, don't hesitate to ask." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and realized something that shocked me. I felt more cared for by this woman I'd known for a week than I did by the son I'd devoted my entire life to raising. But then something even more shocking happened. As I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. David had made it clear he was too busy to visit. I couldn't think of who else would come by. I walked slowly to the front door, still weak from my hospital stay, and looked through the peephole. Standing on my front porch was a young woman I didn't recognize at first. She was pretty, probably in her early 30s, with long dark hair and kind eyes. She was holding a casserole dish and looking nervous. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you, Mrs. Thompson?" she said with a slight accent that I couldn't quite place. "I'm Rosa Hernandez. I don't know if you remember me, but I used to live next door to you about 15 years ago. My mother is Carmen Hernandez." Rosa Hernandez. The name stirred a memory, but I couldn't quite place it. "I work at Portland General Hospital," she continued. "I heard through some colleagues that you'd been admitted to our cardiac unit. I hope you don't mind me stopping by, but I wanted to check on you and bring you some food." Portland General Hospital. That's where I'd been a patient. But I still couldn't remember who she was. "I'm sorry," I said, feeling embarrassed. "I'm still a little foggy from the medication. Could you remind me how we know each other?" Her face fell a little, and I could see she was disappointed that I didn't remember her. But then she smiled again. "It's okay, Mrs. Thompson. It was a long time ago and I was just a teenager then. My mother and I lived in the little apartment next door when you first moved to this neighborhood. You probably don't remember because there have been so many families in and out of that place over the years." As she spoke, a vague memory started to form. A Hispanic woman with a teenage daughter. They had lived next door for maybe 2 years. The woman worked several jobs and the daughter had some kind of trouble at school. "You were having some problems in school," I said slowly, the memory becoming clearer. "Your mother was working so much and you were getting into fights with some girls who were picking on you." Rosa's face lit up. "You do remember?" "Yes, I was having a really hard time. My father had left us, my mother was working 3 jobs just to pay rent, and these girls at school were making my life miserable because of my accent and because we didn't have much money." More memories came flooding back. This girl, this young woman standing in front of me now, had been so angry, so hurt. Her mother had been at her wits' end, not knowing how to help her daughter while struggling to keep them afloat financially. "You used to come over and help me with my homework," Rosa continued. "And you talked to me about not letting other people's ignorance define who I was. You told me that education was the one thing no one could ever take away from me, and that if I worked hard enough I could become anything I wanted to be." I stared at her, these memories mixing with my surprise at seeing her here now as a grown woman. "You said you work at the hospital?" "Yes," she said, and the pride in her voice was unmistakable. I'm a doctor, Mrs. Thompson. I'm a cardiologist. If she had told me she was an astronaut, I couldn't have been more shocked. The angry, struggling teenager who used to sit at my kitchen table doing homework had become a heart doctor. Rosa, I whispered. I can't believe it. How wonderful. Mrs. Thompson, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice becoming more serious. When I heard you were in the hospital alone with no family visiting you, it broke my heart. Because you weren't alone when I needed someone most. You were there for me when my own family couldn't be. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes again. Here was this successful, accomplished woman, telling me that I had made a difference in her life at a time when I felt like I had never mattered to anyone. Would you like to come in? I asked. I just got home from the hospital and I'll be honest, it's been difficult. I would love that, she said. As I let Rosa into my house, the house that had felt so empty and lonely just minutes before, I had no idea that this unexpected visit was about to reveal a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about family, about love, and about who really matters in this world. But that revelation, the one that would shake me to my very core, was still to come. If you're still watching this story unfold, please subscribe to this channel because what happens next will prove that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect, and sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those we trust the most. Rosa followed me into my living room, still carrying that casserole dish, and I gestured for her to sit on the same couch where David had been sitting just a week ago when my world fell apart. The contrast between the two moments couldn't have been starker. David fidgeting with his watch, eager to leave, and Rosa settling in comfortably, like she genuinely wanted to be there. Please sit down, I said. Can I get you some tea or coffee? No, Mrs. Thompson. You just got out of the hospital. I should be taking care of you. She set the casserole dish on my coffee table. I made this last night when I heard you were being discharged. It's my mother's recipe for chicken and rice. I remember you said you liked it when Mama made it for us all those years ago. The fact that she remembered such a small detail from 15 years ago, when my own son couldn't remember to visit me in the hospital, hit me like a physical blow. I sat down across from her, still trying to process this unexpected reunion. Rosa, I have to be honest, I'm having trouble believing that the struggling teenager I remember has become a doctor. Tell me how that happened. Her face grew more serious and she leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Thompson, do you remember the day I came to your house crying because those girls at school had cornered me in the bathroom and cut off a piece of my hair? The memory came back clearly now. I had found her sitting on my front steps, sobbing, with a jagged chunk missing from her beautiful long hair. She had been maybe 16 then, all elbows and knees and teenage anger at the unfairness of the world. I remember, I said softly. You were so upset. Your mother was working and you didn't know what to do. You brought me inside and made me hot chocolate even though it was summer and way too hot for it. And you sat with me at your kitchen table and let me cry for as long as I needed to. Do you remember what you told me? I shook my head. It had been so long ago and I had no idea that anything I said that day had made any lasting impact. You told me that people who try to tear others down do it because they feel small inside. You said that the best revenge against people like that wasn't to fight back or get angry, but to become so successful, so accomplished, that their small minds couldn't even comprehend what I had achieved. I had said that. It sounded like something I might have said, but I had no memory of those specific words. But Mrs. Thompson, that's not even the most important thing you did for me. After that day you started checking on me every afternoon when I got home from school. You would help me with my homework, but more than that you would ask me about my dreams, about what I wanted to do with my life. As she spoke, more memories started coming back. Yes, I did remember those afternoons. Rosa would come over after school and we would sit at my kitchen table. She was so bright, so eager to learn, but her grades were suffering because of all the stress at home and the bullying at school. You told me I was smart enough to be anything I wanted to be, Rosa continued. When I said I wanted to be a doctor, you didn't laugh or tell me to be realistic like everyone else did. You got out these old medical textbooks you had from when you were studying nursing and you let me borrow them. I did remember that. I had kept some of my textbooks from nursing school thinking someday I might go back to school myself, though I never did. Rosa had devoured those books like they were novels. Mrs. Thompson, you probably don't remember this, but one day I was at your house doing homework and I started crying again. Not because of the bullying this time, but because I had gotten my first report card with all A's and I was so proud, but I had no one to share it with. My mother was working double shifts and she was always so tired when she got home. I felt my throat getting tight. I was starting to remember this too. You looked at that report card like it was made of gold. You hung it on your refrigerator right next to David's honor roll certificate from college. You made such a big deal about it, took a picture of me holding it, and you said you were proud of me. The memory hit me with full force now. I had been so proud of her. This girl who had been struggling so much had turned her life around through pure determination and hard work. I remembered thinking that David could learn something from Rosa's work ethic and gratitude. When my mother and I moved away the next year because she got a better job across town, I was heartbroken to leave you, Rosa said. You had become like a second mother to me. You gave me something I had never had before, someone who believed in me unconditionally. I was crying now, not the bitter tears I had cried in the hospital, but tears of wonder and gratitude. Here was this accomplished woman telling me that I had mattered in her life, that I had made a difference at a time when I felt completely worthless and forgotten. Rosa, I'm so proud of you, I managed to say. But I have to ask, how did you manage to become a doctor? I mean, the financial burden alone. Her expression grew more complex and she was quiet for a long moment. That's actually something I need to talk to you about, Mrs. Thompson. Something I've been wanting to tell you for years, but I never knew how to find you until now. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. Do you recognize this? I took the envelope and looked at it. It was addressed to Rosa in my handwriting, but I had no memory of writing it. Open it, she said gently. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check for $5,000, made out to Rosa Hernandez. The date on it was from about 13 years ago. At the bottom in the memo line someone had written, "For your education from someone who believes in you." I stared at the check, completely bewildered. Rosa, I don't understand. I never wrote this check. Yes, you did, Mrs. Thompson. You sent this to me during my senior year of high school. It came with a note that said you had been saving money for David's graduate school, but that he had decided he didn't want to continue his education. You said you wanted the money to go to someone who would use it to make a difference in the world. I felt like the room was spinning. I had no memory of this at all. $5,000 was a significant amount of money for me back then. I would have remembered making such a large financial decision. I don't remember, I said slowly. I mean, I believe you, but I honestly don't remember sending you this money. The note said you didn't want any recognition for it. You said you were doing it anonymously because you didn't want me to feel obligated to you in any way. You just wanted me to have a chance at the education I dreamed of. Rosa reached into her purse again and pulled out a piece of paper that looked like it had been read hundreds of times. She unfolded it carefully and handed it to me. It was indeed in my handwriting, though I still had no memory of writing it. Dear Rosa, I hope this small contribution can help you achieve your dreams of becoming a doctor. You have the intelligence and determination to accomplish anything you set your mind to. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The world needs more doctors like the one I know you'll become. Doctors who understand what it's like to struggle, who will treat every patient with kindness and respect. I'm proud of you and I know your mother is too. With love and best wishes for your future. I read the note 3 times and while I recognized my own handwriting, I felt like I was reading something a stranger had written. How could I have completely forgotten such a significant act of kindness? Rosa, I'm so sorry, but I honestly don't remember writing this or sending you that money. It was so long ago and... Mrs. Thompson, it's okay that you don't remember. That actually makes it even more special to me. It means that helping others was so natural to you, so much a part of who you are, that you didn't even think twice about it. She folded the letter carefully and put it back in her purse. That $5,000 paid for my first 2 semesters of community college. It was the foundation that let me start building my education. From there, I was able to get scholarships and financial aid, but without that initial help, I never would have been able to take the first step. I was stunned. Not just by the fact that I had apparently helped Rosa in such a significant way, but by the fact that I had completely forgotten about it. What did that say about me? Had I helped other people and forgotten about that too? Mrs. Thompson, there's more, Rosa said gently. That wasn't the only time you helped me financially. She reached into her purse one more time and pulled out a small stack of envelopes, all addressed to her in my handwriting. Every semester for 4 years you sent me money. Never a lot, usually between $500 and $1,000, but always exactly when I needed it most. When I was struggling to pay for textbooks or when I needed money for application fees for medical school, somehow an envelope would arrive from you. She handed me the stack of envelopes. There were 12 of them spanning what looked like several years. I opened a few of them randomly. Each contained a cashier's check and a short note of encouragement. The handwriting was definitely mine, but I felt like I was looking at evidence of a life I didn't remember living. How is this possible? I whispered. How could I forget helping you for 4 years? I think, Rosa said carefully, that you were going through a difficult time in your own life then. David had just gotten married and moved across town. You had retired from nursing. You were adjusting to living alone and having an empty nest. Maybe helping me gave you a sense of purpose that you needed. As she spoke, pieces of my memory started coming back, not about Rosa specifically but about that period of my life. David had indeed been distant even then, caught up in his new marriage and his career. I had been lonely and somewhat lost, wondering what my role in the world was supposed to be now that my son didn't need me anymore. I do remember feeling very alone during those years, I admitted. David was so busy with his new life, and I felt like I didn't matter to anyone anymore. But you did matter, Mrs. Thompson. You mattered to me more than you could ever know. Every one of those checks came at exactly the right moment. It was like you had some kind of sixth sense about when I was struggling. Rosa leaned forward and took my hands in hers. Mrs. Thompson, do you want to know something that might sound crazy? I always felt like you were my guardian angel. Not in a religious way but in a real way. Whenever things got really tough, whenever I thought about giving up, somehow you would reach out and remind me that someone believed in me. I looked down at our joined hands, hers young and strong and steady, mine old and spotted with age, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt valuable. I felt like I had made a difference in the world. Rosa, I need to ask you something and please be honest with me. When you heard I was in the hospital alone, why did you come? You owe me nothing. You've clearly built a successful life for yourself. Why take the time to check on an old woman you haven't seen in years? Her answer came without hesitation. Because you're family, Mrs. Thompson. Not by blood but by choice. You chose to believe in me when no one else did. You chose to invest in my future when you didn't have to. You chose to love me when I felt unlovable. That makes you more family to me than some people who share my DNA. The word family hit me like lightning. Here was this woman calling me family, meaning it with her whole heart, while my actual son couldn't even be bothered to visit me in the hospital. Rosa, can I tell you something that might sound terrible? Of course. In the past week, you've shown me more love and concern than my own son has. David didn't visit me once while I was in the hospital. Not once. He was too busy with work and social events to spend even an hour with his mother who almost died. Rosa's face darkened with anger, not at me but for me. That's unacceptable, Mrs. Thompson. I don't care how busy someone is. When your mother is in the hospital, you show up. Period. I keep trying to understand it, to make excuses for him. I tell myself he's just busy, that he shows love differently, that maybe he was scared and didn't know how to handle it. But the truth is, I think he just doesn't care about me anymore. Mrs. Thompson, I want to tell you something and it might be hard to hear, but I think you need to hear it. When I was researching how to find you, I did some searching online. I found David's social media accounts. My stomach dropped. What did you find? Rosa hesitated, clearly not wanting to hurt me but feeling like she needed to tell me the truth. Mrs. Thompson, while you were in the hospital, David posted pictures of himself and his wife at a resort. The dates on the photos show that he was on vacation the entire time you were hospitalized. The room started spinning again. Not only had David not visited me, not only had he lied about being too busy with work, but he had actually gone on vacation while I was lying in a hospital bed, alone and scared. Are you sure? I whispered. Rosa pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. There was David, tan and smiling, with his arm around Jessica on what looked like a beautiful beach. The caption read, "Much needed getaway with my beautiful wife." Sometimes you just have to unplug and focus on what really matters. Focus on what really matters. Apparently, what really mattered to David was not his mother who had just suffered a heart attack. I stared at the photo for a long time, taking in every detail. David looked happier than I had seen him in years. He looked relaxed, carefree, like he didn't have a single worry in the world. Certainly not like someone whose mother was fighting for her life in a hospital. Mrs. Thompson, Rosa said gently, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to show you this, but I felt like you deserved to know the truth. The truth. The truth was that while I was lying in that hospital bed, convincing myself that David was too busy with important work to visit me, he was actually sipping drinks on a beach with his wife. The truth was that my near-death experience hadn't even registered as important enough to cancel a vacation. But strangely, instead of feeling more heartbroken, I felt something else, relief. Relief that I finally knew where I stood with David. Relief that I could stop making excuses for him. Relief that I could stop waiting for him to become the son I needed him to be. Rosa, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in days, thank you for showing me this. It hurts, but I needed to see it. I've been driving myself crazy trying to understand why David has been so distant, making excuses for behavior that has no excuse. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to understand something. David's inability to love you the way you deserve has nothing to do with your worth as a person or as a mother. Some people, no matter how much love they receive, never learn how to give it back. She was right, and for the first time since my heart attack, I felt a spark of something that wasn't pain or confusion or heartbreak. I felt anger, clean, righteous anger at being treated so poorly by someone I had sacrificed everything for. You know what the worst part is? I said. I spent so many years making excuses for David's behavior, telling myself he was just busy or stressed or going through a phase. I convinced myself that if I just kept being patient and understanding, eventually he would realize how much I loved him and start treating me better. That's what loving parents do, Rosa said. We make excuses for our children because we can't bear to believe that they might not love us back the way we love them. But you're not my child, and yet you love me more than he does. Mrs. Thompson, I need to tell you something else, something I've been wanting to say for years. You saved my life. Not dramatically, not by pulling me out of a burning building, but by showing me that I mattered. By believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. By investing in my future when no one else would. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Every patient I treat, every life I save, every person I help, that's all possible because you saw something in a scared, angry teenager and decided to nurture it instead of giving up on her. You didn't just help me become a doctor, Mrs. Thompson. You helped me become a person who believes that everyone deserves kindness and compassion. I was crying again, but these were different tears. These were tears of pride, of fulfillment, of finally understanding that my life had meaning beyond just being David's mother. Rosa, I have a confession to make. When you showed up at my door today, I was at the lowest point of my entire life. I felt worthless, forgotten, like nothing I had ever done mattered. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I didn't even know I was praying. Mrs. Thompson, can I ask you something? Of course. How would you feel about having dinner with me tomorrow night? I'd like to cook for you, and I'd love to tell you more about my work, about the patients I treat, about the difference your investment in my education has made in other people's lives. The invitation was so simple, so normal, and yet it felt like the most precious gift anyone had ever offered me. Someone wanted to spend time with me. Someone wanted to cook for me. Someone was interested in sharing their life with me. I would love that, I said. And Mrs. Thompson, I hope this isn't too forward, but I'd like to be part of your recovery. I know you need someone to check on you for the next few weeks. And I know you don't want to be a burden to anyone. But you wouldn't be a burden to me. You'd be giving me a chance to finally repay some of the kindness you showed me. I looked at this remarkable woman, this doctor who had grown from the troubled teenager I had once tried to help, and realized that sometimes the most important moments in our lives are the ones we don't even remember. Sometimes we plant seeds without knowing it, and years later, we get to see the magnificent trees that grew from them. Rosa, I said, I think you showing up here today might be the most important thing that's happened to me in years. Mrs. Thompson, there's one more thing I need to tell you, and this is the hardest part. My heart clenched. What else could there be? When I was trying to find you, I called the hospital where you used to work, thinking maybe someone there would have your current information. I spoke to a woman named Linda who remembered you. Linda Patterson. We had worked together for years before I retired. She was one of the few people from my old life that I still occasionally talk to. Linda told me something that I think you need to know. She said that about 5 years ago, David called the hospital looking for information about you. About me? What kind of information? Rosa's face was full of compassion and sadness. Mrs. Thompson, he was asking about your insurance, about any money you might have saved, about whether you owned your house outright. Linda said he seemed less concerned about your health and more interested in your finances. The room went completely silent except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. David had been investigating my finances. 5 years ago, when he was still pretending to care about me, he had actually been calculating my worth. Linda said she refused to give him any information, of course, because of privacy laws. But Mrs. Thompson, she was concerned enough about the call that she tried to reach out to you afterward to warn you. She said she called your house several times but never got an answer. I remembered now. There had been a period about 5 years ago when I had been getting calls from the hospital, but I assumed they were trying to get me to come back to work part-time or asking me to participate in some kind of retirement program. I had ignored the calls because I was trying to distance myself from my working life and focus on my family life with David. Linda was worried that David might be planning to take advantage of you in some way. She said in all her years of working with you, she had never known you to talk about money or possessions, but David seemed very interested in both. This revelation was somehow worse than seeing the vacation photos. The vacation photos showed that David didn't care about me, but this suggested that he might actually be calculating how to benefit from me financially. Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but I felt like you deserved to know the truth about who David really is. I sat in silence for several minutes, processing this information. Everything about David's behavior over the past few years suddenly made more sense. The brief, obligatory visits. The way he would ask casual questions about my house, my retirement savings, my insurance. The way he seemed annoyed when I talked about spending money on myself. He hadn't been gradually losing interest in me as a person. He had been calculating my value as an inheritance. Rosa, I said finally, I need to ask you for a favor, and it's a big one. Anything. I need help changing my will. Her eyes widened. Mrs. Thompson, are you sure? I mean, David is still your son, regardless of how he's been acting. Rosa, David stopped being my son the day he decided I was worth more to him dead than alive. A real son would have been at my bedside in the hospital. A real son would have canceled his vacation to make sure his mother was okay. A real son wouldn't have spent 5 years calculating the value of his mother's estate. I stood up, feeling stronger and more determined than I had felt in months. But you, Rosa, you've been more of a daughter to me in the past 2 hours than David has been a son in the past 5 years. You came to see me in the hospital when you heard I was alone. You brought me food when I got home. You've shown me more love and respect today than David has shown me in years. Rosa looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Thompson, I didn't come here because I wanted anything from you. I came because I wanted to give back to you. I know that, I said. That's exactly why I want to do this. David has been thinking of me as his future inheritance for years. You've been thinking of me as family. There's a big difference. That evening, after Rosa left with promises to return the next day for dinner, I sat alone in my house and realized that I wasn't actually alone anymore. I had Rosa now, this wonderful woman who had grown from the seeds of kindness I had apparently planted years ago without even realizing it. For those of you watching this who understand what it feels like to discover that love comes from unexpected places, please subscribe to this channel, because what I learned next about my son's true nature would shock me to my very core and change everything I thought I knew about family, about loyalty, and about what really matters in life. But even as I prepared to learn the most devastating truth about David, I held on to the miracle of Rosa's presence in my life. Proof that sometimes when we lose the family we thought we had, we discover the family we were meant to have all along. The next 3 weeks passed like a beautiful dream I was afraid to wake up from. Rosa visited me every single day, sometimes just for a few minutes between her shifts at the hospital, sometimes for hours on her days off. She would bring groceries, cook meals, help me with household chores I was still too weak to manage, and most importantly, she would simply sit with me and talk. For the first time in years, I looked forward to each new day. I had someone to share my thoughts with, someone who genuinely cared about how I was feeling, someone who made me laugh and reminded me that I was still a person worth knowing. Rosa would tell me about her patients, about the medical cases that challenged her, about her hopes of maybe starting a family someday. And I would share stories from my nursing days, memories from when David was young, dreams I had forgotten I still carried. It felt like having a daughter, the relationship I had always hoped to have with Jessica, David's wife, but never did. Jessica had always been polite to me but distant, like I was just an obligation that came with marrying David. Rosa, on the other hand, seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with me. During those 3 weeks, David called exactly twice. The first call came about a week after I got home from the hospital. "Hi Mom, how are you feeling?" he asked in that same casual tone that had become so familiar and so painful. "I'm doing much better, thank you," I replied, not volunteering any additional information. "That's great. I told you you'd be fine. You're tougher than you think." There it was again, that dismissive attitude that made my near-death experience sound like I had just recovered from a common cold. "David," I said, "I've been thinking a lot lately about family, about what really matters in life." "Oh yeah? That's nice, Mom. Listen, I can't talk long, but I wanted to check in and make sure you're doing okay." "I'm more than okay," I said. "In fact, I've had some wonderful company. Do you remember the Hernandez family who used to live next door to us years ago?" "Vaguely. Why?" "Their daughter Rosa has been taking care of me since I got home from the hospital. She's a doctor now, a cardiologist actually. She's been absolutely wonderful." There was a pause, and when David spoke again, his tone had changed slightly. "A cardiologist? That's great, Mom. Is she charging you for these visits? I mean, doctors usually don't make house calls unless there's some kind of fee involved." The question revealed so much about how David's mind worked. He couldn't imagine someone helping me out of genuine care. There had to be some financial motive. "No, David, she's not charging me anything. She's doing it because she cares about me. Because we're family." "Family? Mom, she's not family. She's just some neighbor girl you used to know. She's more family to me right now than—" I stopped myself. I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. "Then what, Mom?" "Nothing, David. I should let you go. I know you're busy." "Okay, well, take care of yourself. And Mom? Be careful about letting strangers into your house, even if you used to know them. You never know what people's real motives are." After he hung up, I sat there thinking about his warning about people's real motives. The irony was almost laughable, considering what I now knew about his own motives. The second call came 2 weeks later, and this time David sounded different, more urgent, more focused. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said about that doctor friend of yours taking care of you." "Rosa," I said. "Her name is Rosa. Right, Rosa. Look, I'm concerned that she might be taking advantage of you. I mean, think about it. She shows up out of nowhere right after you get out of the hospital, starts spending all this time with you. Doesn't that seem a little suspicious?" I felt my temper rising. "Suspicious? David, the only suspicious thing is that my own son didn't bother to visit me once while I was in the hospital, but a woman I haven't seen in 15 years dropped everything to make sure I was okay. Mom, that's not fair. I was dealing with a work crisis, and besides, I knew you were in good hands with the hospital staff. You were on vacation, David." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. "What did you say?" "I said you were on vacation. At a resort." "Hey, Jessica. I've seen the photos." More silence. Then, "Mom, how did you— who told you that?" "Does it matter? The point is you lied to me. While I was lying in a hospital bed, scared and alone, you were sipping drinks on a beach." "Mom, you don't understand. That trip was planned months in advance. It was non-refundable and you were stable. The doctors said you were going to be fine." "David, I could have died. I did almost die. And your response was to go on vacation." "You're being dramatic again, Mom. You were never in any real danger." That word again, dramatic. I was being dramatic for expecting my son to cancel a vacation when his mother had a heart attack. "David," I said, my voice becoming colder than I had ever heard it, "I think this conversation is over." "Wait, Mom, don't hang up. Look, maybe I didn't handle things perfectly, but I'm trying to make up for it now. I'm concerned about this Rosa person. I think you should be careful about what kind of information you're sharing with her." "What kind of information?" "You know, personal information. Financial information. Information about your assets, your insurance, your will." There was. He was worried that Rosa might interfere with his inheritance plans. "I will, David. I'm just saying, Mom, you're vulnerable right now. You're grateful to this woman for helping you, but you need to think clearly about the future. About your legacy, about making sure your assets go where they should go." "Where they should go?" Meaning to him. "And where should they go, David?" "Well, I mean, I'm your son. I'm your family. It would be natural for—" "For what, David? Say it." Another long pause. "Mom, I don't want to have this conversation over the phone." Maybe I should come over and we should talk about this in person. Now you want to come over? After 3 weeks, now you want to visit. Mom, this is important. This is about your future security, about making sure you don't make any decisions you might regret later. I realized then that David wasn't calling because he was concerned about me. He was calling because he was concerned about his inheritance. Rosa's presence in my life wasn't suspicious to him because he thought she might hurt me. It was suspicious because he thought she might interfere with his financial plans. David, I think you should know something. I've already made an appointment with a lawyer to update my will. The reaction was immediate and intense. Mom, what? What's wrong with your current will? Nothing's wrong with it. I'm just making some changes to reflect my current priorities. Mom, please don't do anything rash. You're still recovering, you're not thinking clearly. Maybe we should talk to the lawyer together, make sure you're making the right decisions. The right decisions for whom, David? For you, of course. For your peace of mind. But his voice betrayed him. This wasn't about my peace of mind. This was about his fear that I was about to give away what he considered his money. David, I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. I've been doing it for 67 years. Mom, please at least wait until I can come see you. We need to talk about this face to face. Fine, I said. You're welcome to visit anytime. You always have been. After I hung up, I called Rosa and told her about the conversation. He's panicking, she said. He's realized that his plan to inherit everything while providing nothing in return might be in jeopardy. Rosa, I have to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you think I'm making this decision too quickly? Am I being unfair to David? Mrs. Thompson, can I ask you a question? In the 3 weeks since you've been home from the hospital, how many times has David visited you? 0. How many times has he called? Twice, and both times it was because he was worried about you affecting his inheritance. How many times has he asked about your health, your recovery, how you're feeling emotionally? I thought about it. Never. Both conversations were about Rosa and about my will. Mrs. Thompson, David has shown you who he is. He's shown you what matters to him. The question isn't whether you're being unfair to him. The question is why you're still trying to protect someone who hasn't protected you. She was right and I knew it. But knowing it and accepting it are two different things, especially when it comes to your own child. 2 days later, David finally came to visit. It was a Saturday afternoon and Rosa was at the hospital working. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard his car in the driveway. I watched through the window as he got out of his expensive sedan and walked toward the house. He looked good, tan from his recent vacation, well-dressed, confident. He looked like success, like someone who had everything he wanted in life. He knocked on the door instead of using his key, which he had always done before. It was a small thing, but it felt symbolic somehow. "Hi, Mom," he said when I opened the door, giving me that quick, perfunctory hug that had replaced the real embraces of his childhood. "You look good. You look like you're feeling better." "I am feeling much better, thank you." We went into the living room and sat down, and immediately I could sense the tension in him. This wasn't a social visit. This was a mission. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about our phone conversation the other day and I think we got off on the wrong foot." "Did we?" "I think you misunderstood my concerns about your doctor friend. I'm not questioning her medical abilities or even her intentions. I'm just worried that you might be feeling so grateful that you're not thinking clearly about the future." "My thinking is perfectly clear, David." "I'm sure it is, but you have to admit this whole situation is pretty unusual. I mean, what are the odds that this person from your past would show up right now, right when you're at your most vulnerable? What are you suggesting, David?" "I'm not suggesting anything exactly. I'm just saying that people can have mixed motives, even good people. Maybe she genuinely cares about you, but maybe she also sees an opportunity." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. When had he become this person? When had he become someone who could only understand relationships in terms of what people could gain from each other? "David, Rosa has been taking care of me for 3 weeks without asking for anything in return. She's cooked for me, cleaned for me, sat with me when I was scared, listened to me when I needed to talk. What exactly do you think her ulterior motive is?" "I think she wants to be in your will, Mom." There was out in the open. David's greatest fear wasn't that someone might hurt me, it was that someone might inherit what he considered his money. "And what if she is in my will, David? Would that bother you?" His mask slipped completely. "Mom, I'm your son. I'm your only child. Everything you have should go to me and Jessica and our future children. That's how families work. Is it? Is that how families work, David? The children ignore their parents until it's time to collect an inheritance. That's not fair, Mom. I don't ignore you. David, you didn't visit me once while I was in the hospital. Not once. I explained that. I was dealing with a work crisis. You were on vacation. His face flushed with anger. Fine, yes, I was on vacation. A vacation that was planned and paid for months in advance. A vacation that I needed for my mental health. You were stable, the doctors said you were going to be fine. What was I supposed to do, cancel everything and sit by your bedside holding your hand? Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. That's what sons do when their mothers almost die. That's ridiculous. That's emotional manipulation. I stared at him, this man who looked like my little boy but sounded like a stranger. David, do you love me? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Of course I love you, Mom. You're my mother. No, I mean, do you actually love me? Do you enjoy spending time with me? Do you think about me when we're not together? Do you worry about my happiness? Do you care about my feelings? The silence stretched on for so long that I had my answer before he spoke. Mom, I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me the truth. More silence. David, let me ask you this. When you think about me dying, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Mom, I don't want to think about that. But when you do think about it, what do you think about? Do you think about missing me, about wishing you had spent more time with me? Or do you think about what you'll inherit? His face was red now with anger or embarrassment, I couldn't tell which. Mom, that's a horrible question. It's a horrible question with an obvious answer, isn't it? I resent the implication that I only care about your money. Then prove me wrong, David. Tell me about the last time you called me just because you wanted to hear my voice. Tell me about the last time you visited me because you enjoyed my company. Tell me about the last time you did anything for me that didn't somehow benefit you. He sat there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water, unable to come up with a single example. David, 5 years ago you called the hospital where I used to work asking questions about my finances. The color drained from his face. How did you? Who told you that? It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that you did it. You were investigating my financial situation like I was some kind of investment opportunity. Mom, that's not. I was just. You were just what, David? I was concerned about your future security. I wanted to make sure you had enough money for retirement, for medical expenses. David, stop lying. Please just stop lying. We both know why you were asking those questions. He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. Fine. Yes, I wanted to know about your finances. But not for the reason you think. Then why? Because I was worried that you might be taken advantage of. Because I wanted to make sure that when the time comes, your money goes to family, not to some nursing home or con artist. Family, David? When was the last time you acted like family? I'm here now, aren't I? Yes, you're here now. But why are you here now, David? You didn't come when I was in the hospital. You didn't come during the 3 weeks I've been recovering. You're here now because you're worried about your inheritance. That's not true. David, you've made it very clear what I mean to you. I'm not your mother anymore. I'm your future inheritance. And you're not my son anymore. You're just someone waiting for me to die so you can collect what you think I owe you. Mom, that's cruel. What's cruel, David, is spending 20 years sacrificing everything for a child who grows up to see you as nothing more than a bank account. He stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, cold, calculating, almost predatory. Mom, let me be very clear about something. I am your son. I am your only child. And regardless of how you feel about my behavior, I am your legal heir. Whatever problems you think we have, they don't change the fact that I'm your family and I deserve to inherit what you've worked for. Deserve, David? Yes, deserve. I'm your flesh and blood. I'm your legacy. That money represents your life's work and it should go to your bloodline, not to some stranger who showed up at the right moment. I looked at this man, my son, and realized that he had just told me everything I needed to know about how he really felt. I wasn't a person to him. I was a life insurance policy that was taking too long to pay out. David, I want you to leave now. Mom, we're not done talking about this. Yes, we are. I want you to leave my house. Mom, you're upset, but we need to work this out. We need to talk about the will situation before you do something you'll regret. The only thing I regret, David, is not seeing who you really were a long time ago. Fine, he said, his voice turning ugly. But don't think this is over. I'm not going to let some manipulative stranger steal my inheritance. Your inheritance? David, the only thing you've inherited from me is my disappointment. He started toward the door, then turned back. Mom, you're making a huge mistake. When this Rosa person shows her true colors, when she takes your money and disappears, don't come crying to me. I won't, I said. Because unlike you, when Rosa looks at me, she sees a person worth loving, not a bank account worth inheriting. He slammed the door on his way out, and I stood there in my living room, shaking not with fear or sadness, but with something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. 20 minutes later, Rosa arrived with groceries and immediately sensed something was wrong. Mrs. Thompson, what happened? You look upset. I told her about David's visit, about everything he had said, about the ugly confrontation that had finally revealed the truth about our relationship. I'm so sorry, Rosa said. I know how much you wanted to believe that David still loved you. You know what the strange thing is, Rosa? I feel relieved. For years I've been trying to understand why David treated me the way he did, making excuses for him, blaming myself. Now I know the truth. He doesn't love me. He probably hasn't loved me for years. And knowing that, as painful as it is better than living in denial. Rosa sat down next to me on the couch. Mrs. Thompson, I need to tell you something. David called me at the hospital yesterday. I was shocked. He called you? How did he even get your number? I don't know, but he did. And Mrs. Thompson, the conversation was disturbing. What did he say? He wanted to know about my relationship with you. He asked if I was licensed to practice in Oregon, if I had any malpractice suits against me, if I had financial problems. He was basically trying to find dirt on me. I felt my heart sink. Rosa, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve to be harassed because you've been kind to me. That's not all, Mrs. Thompson. He also asked me directly if I was expecting to inherit anything from you. When I told him that wasn't any of his business, he said that he was your son and he had a right to protect your interests. He said that. Mrs. Thompson, he wasn't calling to protect your interests. He was calling to protect his interests. He sees me as a threat to what he considers his money. I sat there processing this information. David hadn't just confronted me about the will, he had been investigating Rosa behind my back, trying to find ways to discredit her or intimidate her into staying away from me. Rosa, I want you to know something. Tomorrow morning I'm going to see my lawyer and I'm going to change my will. I'm going to leave everything to you. Mrs. Thompson, no. I didn't come back into your life looking for an inheritance. I came back because I care about you. I know that, Rosa. That's exactly why I want to do this. David has made it very clear that he sees my death as his payday. You've made it very clear that you see my life as worth protecting. The choice is obvious. But Mrs. Thompson, he's still your son. No, Rosa, he's not. Not anymore. A son is someone who loves you, who protects you, who puts your welfare before his own interests. David is just someone who shares my DNA and who's waiting for me to die so he can cash in. Rosa was quiet for a long time. Mrs. Thompson, if you do this, David will never forgive you. He'll never speak to you again. I thought about that for a moment. Rosa, David hasn't spoken to me, really spoken to me as a person he cares about, in years. He talks to me, but only when he wants something or when he's worried about his inheritance. If he never speaks to me again, honestly, what would I be losing? That evening, Rosa cooked dinner for us and we sat at my kitchen table eating and talking about the future. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about what lay ahead. Rosa, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you want children someday? She smiled. I do. I hope to have a family of my own someday when I meet the right person. And do you think you'll be a good mother? I hope so. I've learned a lot about motherhood from watching you, both when I was a teenager and now. You've shown me what unconditional love looks like, what it means to sacrifice for someone else's future, what it means to believe in someone even when they don't believe in themselves. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Rosa, do you know what David said to me today? He said that blood makes family, that he deserves my inheritance because he's my flesh and blood. What do you think makes family, Mrs. Thompson? I think love makes family. I think showing up makes family. I think caring about someone's happiness more than your own convenience makes family. I think you've been more of a daughter to me in the past month than David has been a son in the past 5 years. The next morning, Rosa drove me to my lawyer's office. Patterson was the same attorney who had drawn up my original will 15 years ago, and he was surprised to see me. Margaret, it's good to see you. I heard you'd been in the hospital. How are you feeling? Much better, thank you. Patterson, I need to make some significant changes to my will. Of course. What kind of changes are we talking about? I looked at Rosa, who squeezed my hand encouragingly, and then I told Mr. Patterson exactly what I wanted to do. He listened carefully, taking notes, and when I finished he set down his pen and looked at me seriously. Margaret, these are very substantial changes. Are you certain this is what you want to do? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. And you understand that this will likely cause significant family conflict? Mr. Patterson, there is no family conflict because there is no family. There's just me and someone who's been waiting for me to die so he can inherit my money. Patterson spent an hour going over all the legal implications, making sure I understood exactly what I was doing. Then he drafted the new will and I signed it with Rosa and his secretary as witnesses. As we walked out of the lawyer's office, Rosa took my arm. Mrs. Thompson, how do you feel? I feel free, I said. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. 3 days later, David called. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day and I think we both said some things we didn't mean. I meant everything I said, David. Mom, I know you're angry with me and maybe you have a right to be. Maybe I haven't been the best son lately. But I want to make it up to you. How do you plan to do that? I want to start visiting you more often. I want to be more involved in your life. Jessica and I were talking and we think maybe you should come stay with us for a few days each month. It was almost laughable. David was offering to let me visit my own son a few days each month. Like I was some kind of elderly charity case he was graciously willing to accommodate. David, why the sudden change of heart? Because you're my mother and I love you and I want us to have a better relationship. David, I changed my will yesterday. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. What did you say? I said I changed my will yesterday. Everything goes to Rosa now. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Mom, that's insane. You can't leave everything to a stranger. I'm your son. David, Rosa isn't a stranger. She's the person who was there when you weren't. She's the person who cared when you didn't. She's the person who sees me as more than just a future inheritance. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're upset with me, I get that, but you can't punish me by giving my inheritance to some random person. Your inheritance, David? When did my money become your inheritance? When did my life's work become something you were entitled to? I'm your son. Everything you have should come to me. Why, David? Give me one good reason why you deserve anything from me. Because I'm your blood. David, blood didn't visit me in the hospital. Blood didn't call to check on me. Blood didn't bring me food when I was too weak to cook for myself. Blood didn't sit with me when I was scared. Rosa did all of those things and Rosa isn't my blood. Mom, please, you have to reconsider this. You're making a mistake that you'll regret for the rest of your life. The only mistake I made, David, was waiting so long to see you for who you really are. Mom, if you don't change that will back, you'll never see me again. I paused for a moment, considering his threat. Then I realized something that felt like a revelation. David, I haven't really seen you in years anyway. The person I thought you were, the son I loved, that person doesn't exist anymore. If he ever existed at all. Fine, David said, his voice turning cold and ugly. But don't think this is over. I'll contest that will. I'll fight it in court. I won't let some gold-digging manipulator steal what's rightfully mine. Good luck with that, David. I think any judge will be very interested to hear about how you went on vacation while your mother was in the hospital. The line went dead. I hung up the phone and realized that I felt nothing, not sadness, not regret, not anger. Just peace. An hour later, Rosa arrived for her daily visit and I told her about the call. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Thompson. I know this must be painful for you. You know what, Rosa? It's not painful anymore. It's liberating. I spent so many years trying to earn David's love, trying to be the perfect mother, trying to understand why he was so distant. Now I know the truth. He never loved me the way I loved him. He was just waiting for me to die so he could inherit what I had worked for. Mrs. Thompson, can I tell you something I've never told you before? Of course. When I was a teenager struggling with those bullies at school, feeling like nobody cared about me, you saved my life in more ways than one. But it wasn't just the financial help, although that was crucial. It was the way you saw me. You saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You treated me like I mattered when everyone else treated me like I was invisible. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Mrs. Thompson, you taught me that love isn't about blood or obligation. Love is about choice. You chose to love me when you didn't have to. You chose to believe in me when you had no reason to. You chose to invest in my future when there was nothing in it for you. Rosa, having you back in my life has reminded me of something I had forgotten. I had forgotten what it feels like to be valued for who I am, not for what I can provide. I had forgotten what it feels like to have someone choose to spend time with me because they enjoy my company. Mrs. Thompson, I want you to know something. Even if you hadn't changed your will, even if you had left everything to David, it wouldn't have changed how I feel about you. You're not just a patient to me or even just a friend. You're family. The family I chose and who chose me back. 6 months later, Rosa and I have settled into a routine that feels more natural and loving than any relationship I've had in years. She visits me several times a week and I've started going to some of her hospital events as her guest. Her colleagues have all met me and treat me like Rosa's beloved family member, which is exactly what I am. David kept his promise. I haven't seen or heard from him since that final phone call. At first, I waited for him to cool down and reach out, maybe to apologize or at least to try to rebuild some kind of relationship. But as the months passed, I realized that David had shown me who he really was. He was someone who could cut his own mother out of his life completely because she didn't leave him her money. The strangest thing is that I don't miss him. I thought I would, but I don't. What I miss is the son I thought I had, the son I hoped he was. But that son was just a fantasy I had created to avoid facing the truth about who David really was. Last month, I heard through a neighbor that David and Jessica bought a new house. A much more expensive house than they had been living in. I wondered briefly how they had afforded it, but then I remembered that David had always been good at finding ways to get what he wanted. Rosa, meanwhile, has been promoted to head of cardiology at her hospital. She's also started dating a wonderful man named Michael, a pediatrician who treats her like the treasure she is. When she told me about him, her face lit up in a way that reminded me of how she used to look as a teenager when she talked about her dreams of becoming a doctor. Mrs. Thompson, I want you to meet Michael soon, she told me last week. He's heard so much about you and he's eager to meet the woman who helped shape who I am. I'd love to meet him, Rosa. Anyone who makes you happy makes me happy. Mrs. Thompson, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret changing your will? I thought about it for a moment. Rosa, the only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. David made it very clear that he saw me as his inheritance, not as his mother. You've made it very clear that you see me as your chosen family. Why would I leave my life's work to someone who couldn't wait for me to die, instead of leaving it to someone who's been working to keep me alive? For those of you who have watched this entire story, I want to thank you for subscribing and for understanding the journey I've been on. The journey from heartbreak to healing, from disappointment to discovery, from feeling forgotten to feeling cherished. I learned something important through all of this. Family isn't about blood. Family is about love, commitment, loyalty, and choice. Rosa chose to love me when she didn't have to. She chose to care for me when no one else would. She chose to see me as valuable when my own son saw me as expendable. David, on the other hand, chose to prioritize his vacation over my health. He chose to investigate my finances instead of investigating my feelings. He chose to see me as his future inheritance instead of his present mother. Sometimes the people we love the most turn out to be the people who love us the least. And sometimes the people who love us the most are the people we least expect. If you're watching this and you have adult children, I hope you never have to go through what I went through. But if you do, I hope you'll remember that you deserve to be loved for who you are, not for what you can provide. You deserve to have people in your life who see you as a person worth knowing, not just a person worth inheriting from. And if you're watching this and you have elderly parents, I hope you'll remember that time is the most valuable gift you can give them. Not money, not promises of future visits, not quick phone calls when you need something. Time, presence, love. Because someday when they're gone, you won't remember the work meetings you couldn't miss or the social events you couldn't cancel. You'll remember the moments you spent together, or the moments you wish you had spent together. Rosa taught me that love is a choice we make every day. David taught me that blood doesn't guarantee love and love doesn't require blood. Today, as I sit in my living room waiting for Rosa to arrive for Sunday dinner, I feel something I haven't felt in years. I feel loved. I feel valued. I feel like I matter to someone. And that, I've learned, is worth more than any inheritance could ever be. Thank you for watching, and please remember to like this video if it touched your heart, because stories like this remind us all of what really matters in life. Not the money we leave behind, but the love we share while we're here.